Hello and welcome back to this SlimDevOps episode 8. Thank you all for joining. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, this was originally recorded live on Friday, the 23rd of July, over on Twitch, twitch.tv/SlimDevOps. So if you want to see these live, do head over to our Twitch channel and give us a follow. And hello to everyone in the live chat that stopped by this evening. We're going to be talking about container registries and repositories. But before that, hello again, Peter. How are you?
Hey, Martin. Good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. You look like you're in a different location.
I am one Twitch stream away from vacation. So I am down on the beach at my parents' beach house in this kind of cool little bar that we have here in their house that's dates back to the 1880s, which is kind of cool. It's kind of a fun place to do a stream from. I've been working here all week, so excited about it. So
very nice too.
Yeah, not too hot here compared to you guys have been having a bit of a heat wave over there in London, huh?
Yes, we're having summer all at once in England, apparently, and it all got too much for me. So now that the lockdown restrictions have been lifted in the UK, I made my way back to the co-working space that I used to go to in the summer months when it was hot and bothersome because they have great air conditioning. So today was my first day back in an air-conditioned office, and I kind of miss it now. I'm back home here in the heat.
Nice. And you said one of the offices there is called America. They name them after the different countries. Is that right?
One of the floors, so the different areas are themed. So downstairs there's a Zen area and Narnia, where you can actually go through the wardrobe into the forest and all the rest of it. And in one of the upstairs offices, it's America. And one half is the East Coast and the other half is the West Coast. And I'm in Illinois, somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Well, Illinois is a good place. I was born in Illinois, so that's close to home. But yeah, I feel like the Americans didn't really show up today at the I'm not sure who caught the Olympics opening ceremonies today, but it was all the pageantry and everybody has all their amazing costume, their regalia and all that. And the Americans are wearing these like white striped polo shirts, that are just, kind of looked a little like the French Navy or something. So it was, I don't think it was a great showing for us in the style department as far as Americans go. I didn't catch the Great Britain one, but the, compared to some of the other countries, there are some pretty great costumes. It
completely passed me by that the Olympics were starting today. In fact, I didn't even know the European Cup was happening until I found out that football was going on. The current state of things, I'm just not up to speed with sporting events. I'll have to tune in later, watch the highlights.
Yeah, it caught me off guard a little bit because it was early in the day in Tokyo, so it was right. I was getting my coffee and watching, but yeah, pretty good. So yeah, Big Pot. I didn't catch the Slovenians there, but I'll have to look for a photo, see how they did. I bet they had some style. So
I'm sure. Well, we have a few announcements. So first of all, we've been sprucing up our Discord channel, which you will find links to at the URL above me. In the footer of that site is a link to our Discord. That's been supercharged, and we're supercharging it for good reason. So if you're not already hooked up to our Discord, do come over there. You're going to be getting all sorts of exclusive early access to things, which we'll be touching on a little bit later. And also, for those of you that are watching, you may also want to head over to the Almost Ready discourse forum as well. So that's at community.slim.ai. And that will get its final bit of polish next week, but you're more than welcome to head over there and get signed up, because again, that's where we're going to be brokering some of the discussions and conversations with the community and offering them some early access and swag and things. So do get signed up in both those places if you want to be a part of that. We've had some good news about one of our colleagues this week, haven't we, Peter?
Yeah, we have a talk accepted at the Open Source Summit, so folks will be over at that in Seattle in September. Our head of culture, Jillian Huffnagel, who I think we'll have on the stream here pretty soon, had a talk accepted about what to do when your open source project gets popular enough that you're thinking about creating a company out of it. So she obviously thought a lot about this as we were kind of taking Docker Slim and building out the Slim.AI side. And so she'll be talking about that experience, and it should be pretty interesting. So looking forward to that. Stay tuned. Yeah. And then I think one other nice note is about Twitch is that we'll, in August, we're going to be having a special guest on this show. We're going to have Brendan O'Leary from GitLab come on with us. He's very involved in CNCF and knows a lot about containers and developer experience. So I think he'll be talking to us about that. So that'll be pretty fun. Mark your calendars. We'll send out some scheduling notes on that.
Yeah. Great. Right. So without further ado, we're going to have a chat about registry basics. Now, the reason that we're going to cover this topic is that we've had some feedback that some of our recent streams, people have found that the advanced topics have been a bit too advanced, and there's been a request to sort of revisit some basic stuff, because there's still people that want to level up their skills and they're at the beginning of their sort of container journey. Now, I see that Yannick's with us. Yannick, would you, in the live chat, if you would just like to explain the kind of things you would like to see in terms of tutorials and getting started content, and a little bit later we'll circle back to that and we'll see what we can do to schedule some stuff around the topics that you're interested in. And the same goes for anyone else here. If there are particular topics, basic, intermediate or advanced, that you'd be interested in us exploring, then let us know what those are and we'll collect that up and we'll cover those in future live streams. So with that, what are registries anyway? Pieter?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I don't know, we're all new to this, so I've been learning a lot in the 4 months since I've been at Slim, because we have some pretty good container experts at the company who are explaining some of these. So registries are basically the place that you store your images, right? So if you're working with a local Docker file and you're creating your image, and then you need to go put it somewhere, right? Because you want to share it with somebody, you want to send it to a cloud application, you want to just do something with it and put it somewhere. And, so the registry is going to be where you're going to push or upload your container image once it's done, so that there's a record of it. And then you can pull container images down from a registry. And there's a bunch of different types of registries out there, and we'll get into some of the different concepts on them. But that's the basic idea. We're kind of borrowing this image from Microsoft because, we can't do it too much better than explaining it this way. But here they kind of use this motif of like a bookshelf. It's where you're taking this image, and the image is just the, set of instructions and files and those things that you're going to put up in the cloud. And then anybody can pull down those instructions. Then you run the build command to create the actual container, and then you run that individual container, right? So the registry is just really the storage place for that. And then there's sort of this difference there's a couple different nuances, I guess. There's public versus private, which is kind of the first big question that people ask. And it's a little bit of a trap question in that, people think of public repos as being sort of the communal ones, the ones that everybody knows about. So, there's Rocker, which I know our podcast is here. He uses that one, or the different R versions, or, there's the Ubuntu image, right, which you guys all know. And people think of that, but actually like a public repository, I can actually, as an individual, put up images in a public repository. So when I have my Slim PSV images, right, I put them up into DockerHub, and that's actually public, even though it's my own individual account, right? So there's a little bit of like a challenge in nomenclature there. Generally, when people say public versus private, they're talking about access controls and ACLs. Is can the entire internet go and get my image? And that's usually what the free DockerHub version is. Or is it a select group, say my team or my organization, that can access that, and that's the private repo. So
okay, so and so what are the sort of the primary registry providers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we did a short article on this that's over on the Slim blog. So if people want to go kind of do a comparison, they can look through that. There's a lot of great information out there, but DockerHub is the big one, right? And DockerHub is the registry that is provided by Docker, the software, and Docker, the company. So when you go to Docker space push in your command line, if you don't tell it anything else, it's going to push things up to DockerHub. You'd have to log in and authenticate, of course. You have to have an account there. But that's going to be a public and free account that you have. So it's good to know that when you do that Docker push, you're really putting things out on the public internet, unless you make some specific choices to limit those access controls. But that's by and large, when people call registry, it's almost synonymous. DockerHub is almost synonymous with registries. So, there is a private paid version of DockerHub, so you can use that. It's not super expensive, but so if you didn't want people to access your images, or if you really cared that what you're sharing stays private, then you can do that. There's some team functionality there too. The other ones that are really popular are come from the big three providers, right? So Amazon Web Services, Google Container Registry, and Azure Container Registry. And as you might think, those have a lot to do with people wanting to keep their containers, say, close to their infrastructure. So if you have everything on AWS, you can keep your stuff in the Elastic Container Registry, which is AWS's version. And then if you're pushing things off to Fargate or whatever, that might just be easier and simpler from a management perspective for you. Largely, that's been a private registry, or at least one that's used by teams and companies. But they did just not too long ago release a public repository, so you can actually go find public images there and pull them down from there instead of pulling them from Docker, if that's your preference.
Right.
On the Google one, it's kind of best known for, for private registries as well. A lot of people use it if they're using, sort of the Google Cloud. Recently, they've been putting a big focus on serverless applications. So if you're running things that, just spin up a container, run a process, and then spin it back down, that's been a big focus for them. And if people, have been watching the Kelsey Hightower Twitter Spaces, he's been doing a lot of stuff, kind of talking through what that looks like. And that stuff's pretty interesting. And then obviously the Azure Container Registry, I mean, Big Pod might know a little bit more about it than I do, or have more experience with it than I do, but that's, really for kind of people who are working in Windows environments and stuff like that, though it does have a lot of good security protocols that it's sort of known for being hyper secure. There are a few others like Red Hat Quay, which was really popular. It was kind of a DockerHub competitor, but you don't hear as much about it these days. It's a little more enterprise, and there's others on JFrog. The registry space has really gotten kind of commoditized over time. Also because there's a couple of open source, kind of roll your own types of registries. Harbor is the most popular project, though VMware now supports Harbor as an open source project. Right. And that's if you wanted to run your own registry in your own server, if you wanted to have something on-prem, or if you were going to, be sharing that with your organization, you just really wanted to fine tune what you were getting out of the registry. So those Docker also has an open source project called Registry, which allows you to do that, run your own server on-prem. And then there's a few kind of more specialty ones, I think, like JFrog, which is a hybrid. It can run in the cloud or on premises, and then it comes with all the artifact repository and stuff that JFrog is known for. And even GitLab and GitHub are starting to get in the game and offer their own registry concepts for people who want their containers to kind of live close to their CI tools. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot to know. I mean, if you don't know anything else, you're probably using DockerHub, and your images are probably or public. So that's the thing to know. But if you do want to play around, Google Container Registry, I was just playing around with it today, and it's actually the UI for it's pretty good if you know how to use the the Google command line tools. And the AWS one, I know those guys are working on a lot of like interesting new features and functionality, and they'll be rolling out some new stuff, I'm sure. Just knowing what I know about the teams at Amazon, so those are definitely ones to watch, and we'll see where it goes. So
that's interesting. So there's a lot of different options out there for your registries. I see we have some questions and feedback. We will get to that. Don't worry, we'll get to your questions at the end. But if you've got a hybrid cloud and you're deploying to Google because the billing for a particular worker node there is more favorable, but then you've got some bigger instances on AWS, that's a lot of places you're pushing your containers around. Is there a way to sort of, harmonize all of your, connections to these different registries?
Yeah, I mean, not that I know of. We are working at Slim on some functionality that allows you to connect to the different registries, so you can connect to all three, DockerHub, AWS, and Google Container Registry. And we're looking to add others, Quay and Harbor. We'll see what else we get into, Harbor or JFrog, depending on those connection types and availability. But yeah, I think it is something that as we start seeing more and more multi-cloud applications, we're going to start seeing this challenge for people more and more, that their containers are just living in a bunch of different places. I know I was talking to a company, pretty big company, that had most of theirs in Azure Container Registry, and then they hired a bunch of new people from Amazon who all wanted to put the containers in Amazon. So they're sort of like straddling these two worlds. And I was like, okay, so you're switching from one to the other. And they're like, no, we're just doing both. It's like, okay, that's the way it is these days. So
indeed. So we are working on the early access of our platform, which you can find here, obviously Slim.AI above. You'll see there's some invites still left at that URL. So Cutley/Slim Early Access. If you're interested in playing with connections to multiple registries, then come and get signed up and try that out. Have you published your container images to multiple registries before to try them out in different clouds? If you want to tinker with stuff like that, come and give it a go and share your feedback. Let us know how it works for you. Is there a registry you really, really, really want but that is not currently supported? Also useful information for us in terms of prioritizing what we're doing. So we did get some feedback. So let me just scroll back up here. So first of all, Eric, who goes by our podcast, said it's probably a bit niche, but I'd like to hear about best practices with managing environment variables to inject into Docker files and Docker Compose manifests. Okay, thanks very much. We'll add that to
I don't think that's niche at all. I think we get that question a lot. Yeah. If you look in the, some of the profiling that we've done on the containers is to show environment variables. And I know that's kind of a common pain point, along with security, secrets and stuff like that. I know that's something that people say, yeah, we can definitely do a show on that. That would be great. So.
Right. And then Yannick, who goes by French Guy CH, says, so what I'd like to know is really, how does a container work? What's the difference with a VM? Can I have an ARM container on an x86 host? How do I create a simple container from scratch? Okay, so there's a few things there, and we can definitely break some of those down in more detail in a future episode, because I think starting with what is a container, how is it different from a VM, and how do I make a really simple container, maybe we can go back to something even simpler than we've used in the past and really sort of just put the 3 lines in we need to make a container before we get into the how you make a good container, just make the absolute bare bones. So we can definitely look at that. Yannick, in terms of how they work, we can cover this in more detail, but containers work by isolating the application in its own namespaced file system, using C groups and AppArmor and setcomp, but the container shares the kernel with the host operating system. So it doesn't have that overhead of having to virtualize hardware, which is what you get in a VM, where the VM, you have a full operating system inside the VM with a kernel, with either emulated hardware or, hardware passed through to devices, which carries a bit more overhead. Not as much today as it did some years ago, but nevertheless, there's more overhead with VMs. So you can get better server density with containers than you can with VMs. That's the traditional rule of thumb. The lines blur a little bit with some of the VM technologies that exist today, but generally speaking, containers, you can pack more containers on your server than you can VMs. And to use an example, Yannick, that you're familiar with, a snap is a container, very like a Docker image. So Docker images and snaps actually share all of the same fundamental technologies underneath, other than the way they're stored and accessed, and some of the mediation that happens between it's Docker running it or Snapd running it. They're containers. You can think of them as the same sort of thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit if you've got any follow-up on that. Eric goes on to say that another topic he'd be interested in is best techniques for debugging container builds. So specifically builds rather than the running application. Okay. Can you give us an example of like an issue you've run into with a build where you would have wanted some more information about, what it is you wanted to dig into to understand what had gone wrong? And then we have Ali with a lot of numbers after his name, 123492, asks, how does a registry operate? Does it have to provide a certain API? Yes, it does provide an API. So there's a client application and a server and an API in order to manage whether you're pushing an image or pulling or tagging, releasing, whatever you want to do with it. And if you want, and he asks, if I wanted to code a registry from scratch, what would I need to do? Well, you could code one from scratch. You could go and look at Harbor, which is an open source implementation of a registry. And you could use that as reference, or better yet, don't code your own. If you want to have your own registry, then start with Harbor. And if there's something that it doesn't do that you really feel you and your team need, then contribute there. Probably a good way to get started.
Yeah. Ali, if you want to come on the stream and we'll code one together, it'll, I don't know, maybe it'd be like a 24-hour challenge or something. I don't know. It sounds like a big job. I appreciate the challenge. I think that would be cool. I think +1 to Harbor. Also the Docker registry open source project. You could try that too. I mean, just maybe even to give yourself a little bit of a blueprint on how the registry would work and what types of APIs it's looking for and what types of calls and push pulls you would need to do. Yeah, we can look into doing a little more of a deep dive on how registries actually work, but that's a little beyond my my skill set here. So if you do come up with something cool on your own, tweet it at us. I'd love to check it out. So
I will be making notes of all of this feedback, and we will make sure that we factor these in as more detailed answers in future streams and most likely blog posts as well. So thanks for this feedback. So Eric goes on to say that at his day job, they're using JFrog and Artifactory for storing container images with Docker and Singularity. Interesting. So, Eric, I'll just bring it up again. I don't remember if you've signed up for the early access, but do get signed up and logged in. I'd be interested to hear how you get on connecting to different registries and how that works for you. I know that we don't have JFrog support there, but you've got some sample images that you work on open source projects, I know. So I'd be interested to hear how your sort of view of that feature works for you. And BigPod's using a self-hosted registry, he says.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about with the on-prem.
Right.
Which one are you using, BigPod? I'm kind of curious, and what your experience with that has been. Yeah, and I've also haven't heard of Singularity. Our podcasts. I don't. Yeah, have you? Is that another container registry, or is that something slightly separate?
And BigPod goes on to say that they have some limited experience with the Azure Container Registry, which they think is pretty decent. Monica is also interested in an introduction to containers, so maybe we'll factor that one in very soon in the upcoming schedule of live streams. I'm going to be doing some ad hoc live streams, so stay alert, stay awake, get followed, because although we do this weekly sort of roundup, I'm going to start doing some learn with me type streams, which is going to cover not just container tech, but also tech that we use at work in order to get stuff done. So, for example, I've just given our Discord a brush up and added a bunch of features and bots there. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is going through our Discord configuration. How did I set things up, and what bots did I use, and why did I use them, and how do you make a Discord community operate?
Yeah. So Ollie had one follow-up question there on the registries, which he's asking, what does it do other than push and pull images? That's just like an FTP. I think the main difference that you see, at least from kind of like the level that we're talking about, I'm sure there's tons of internals that are there that are much more nuanced that some of the experts could talk about more, but it actually sends things back layer by layer. And that's kind of like the big thing to know. So every Docker container is composed by a layer, and the registry sort of knows whether, like which layer to send at a different time. So there's sort of some like caching that happens, and there's some different processes that happen as you push and pull, and it kind of does it by that layer process and according to a set of instructions. So I think that it reduces the build times. It's not just like you're taking one big image and sending it up there and then getting the other one back. So I think that's what the special sauce in the registry software is, and I'm sure they do a ton of other things like that have to do with access management and stuff like that. And you ask if the API is the same across all of them. I don't know that, to be sure. I would assume not, because they're kind of proprietary, but I actually don't know the answer to that one. So we'll have to look that up for you.
Okay. Yannick went on to say that I'll ask what kind of load, CPU and RAM, does Docker induce? You can think of containers as being native performance. Oftentimes the performance impact is immeasurable unless you're doing something really interesting. So just think of it as native performance. You can, constrain the container, to limit the CPU affinity and things like that. But, you can think of a simple container as native. How many containers can I run simultaneously? As many as you've got disk space, RAM, and CPU to run the processes. So lots and lots and lots. Even on something
like a
like
hardware challenge coming for this crew. I mean, they would just spin up who can start the most containers without frying their machine. Is the challenge.
I was looking into a competition like that. So some years ago, Docker ran a competition which was how many web servers can you run? How many web server containers can you run on a Raspberry Pi 2? And somebody got to plus 2,500 on a Raspberry Pi 2, which was impressive. And I was thinking about revisiting that as a community competition. If you like the idea of that, let me know. We maybe get that running, sort out some prizes if you fancy a crazy challenge like that. And then Eric goes on to say about debugging. Sometimes I've encountered issues when running custom commands of a custom running of Linux commands in the run step, and it would be great to be able to enter a shell into the container right before the fail step. Okay, right, I understand the sort of thing you're looking for. We can definitely look at some what you can do at the build stage in order to sort of peek inside the container and get some insight as to what's worked and what hasn't. Right then, I'm just looking through the rest. Thank you, Eric, for the details about Singularity.
Yeah, I was going to say for community tea time, Monica and Yannick, yeah, I love the idea of an intro to containers. I mean, I think that would be a really cool thing to do. We could start with a specific language, or we could just build something from scratch and kind of walk through it from that. Maybe we just do a live coding, kind of build up from zero, and you know, if people want to bring their own apps, that could be pretty cool. So yeah, we'll definitely tee that up. That sounds like a great one for us. So.
Yeah, we've been discussing the idea of putting some workshops together. So if you bring some apps, maybe we can use this as sort of the proto workshop. You know, we'll use your apps that you bring along, or apps that you're interested in, and build some real introductory material around things that you're already familiar with. So you don't have to learn the app, you just are learning the container bit around something you already understand.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good initial, if you know how to code a little bit, or you have some familiarity. I'm assuming everybody in here does, because you know, you guys have all been around kind of the tech space. One of the big learnings for me was that what you don't do the first thing with a container is you don't just download some software that you like that has a container around it and then try to run it, because it's not actually anything. You know, it's more akin to a server than it is to something that you would do. So even these game servers that we were talking about last time, right? You don't kind of just download Factorio and then run Factorio. You know, it's a server unto itself. So having an app that you can put into the container and then do some things with it is actually a lot more intuitive than just sort of downloading Ubuntu and trying to shell into it and do stuff, because that's not really the paradigm. What you're trying to do is put an actual application in the container and then see how it manifests and operates. So I think if we start from that point, some things might start clicking for people. I know when I first did it, I downloaded the Flask container, which isn't really the way to do it. What you do is you get the Python container, install Flask in it and the Docker file, and then run your app from there. You know, so that's a little bit of the nuance, and I think that'll come clear if we go through that example. So.
Well, that's been some fantastic feedback from everybody. Thank you very much for that. That's given us plenty to think about. I'll collect up all of your comments at the end of the stream, and we'll have a think about how we can put some workshops together to get people set on a path of using containers for the first time, or in some cases, I think a few people said it's always good to review what they already know and see what you may pick up that's new or improved along the way. So we will put some of that together. Absolutely. Well, I think that brings this to a close. I think that was everything we wanted to present today. Hopefully now you understand a little bit more about registries and repositories, and we'll look forward to expanding on the container sort of 101 topics in future streams. So do follow, because like I say, starting next week I'm going to be doing some ad hoc streams on not just container stuff but some other things as well. And with that, I think we'll say farewell.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. I love all the feedback, love all the conversation, and I'll be on vacation next week, so I will see you all in 2 weeks. So
yeah, see you in a couple of weeks, Peter. Thanks for coming by, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks everybody. Bye.